Hello and welcome to the Raising Disciples Together podcast, a Cornerstone West LA podcast where we get to join together as a church family to spur one another on towards discipling the kids God has entrusted to us.
Welcome again to the Raising Disciples Together podcast. My name is Jeremy Neiditch.
And I'm Allison King.
And today we are discussing what discipleship looks like in foster care. And before you tune out and think, I don't foster, or I'm never going to foster, or I have no desire to ever foster children, I would urge you to pause and just listen for a little bit, because I do think that as we unpack this, we're going to see how discipleship is unique in foster care, but it also carries principles in it that we can glean for parenting and discipling our kids. But also, we're hoping that maybe it sparks some interest in some of you to foster. So with that being said, our two guests today are my wife, Kristen Neiditch.
Hi.
And Pastor Brian's wife, Chrissie Colmery.
Hey, guys.
Thank you guys for being here. Would you each maybe just take a couple minutes and explain what your family dynamics are?
Sure, I'll start. This is Chrissie speaking. Brian and I have been married for 17 years, and we have two biological children. My oldest is 15, and my next oldest is 13. After that, we adopted 3 children from foster care. They're all biologically related. They're 11, 10, and 7. And when the second foster child arrived, we decided 4 is enough. I think everybody was under 5 years old at that point, and I was very, very busy. So we decided to decertify immediately, but her case got caught in the system and was stuck there for 4 years. And because we weren't able to close, a brother arrived. So now... Obviously, that was God's providence. We did not want 5 children, but we are very happy that God built our family that way.
And Kristen?
Yeah, I'm Kristen. I am Jeremy's wife, and we've been married 10 years this year. We have no biological children, but in 2020, we became certified foster parents, and through 2023, during that time period, we fostered 2 infant placements. One came to us when she was 6 weeks and was with us for about 6 months. And the next placement that we had came to us at 3 months, and she was with us for 2 years.
Yeah. They both were also placed with biological family at some point during the...
Yeah, they reunified with extended family at the end of that.
Yeah, so obviously this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart and those of us on this podcast today. So thanks for listening. And I think one of the things about foster care, and the reason we wanted to highlight this, number one, May is Foster Care Month, Foster Care Awareness Month. And so we thought, what a great opportunity to highlight this unique area of discipleship, but also to help people understand a little bit what discipleship looks like in that area, and to, like I said, spark maybe some interest in foster care. I feel like Cornerstone has always been very out in front of the foster care and adoption process. That's kind of, we'll get into this, but so I think foster care is one of the rawest forms of discipleship, in that it is very messy, it's very sacrificial, and it's very imperfect, yet it teaches us so much about who God is and how his sacrificial love for us invites us into his family. And so that's what we want to kind of focus on today, and that's what we're going to hope to highlight. To get started, I want to ask both of you, what led you into the world of foster care?
I think I'll let Chrissie answer first, only because your answer, you are my answer. So I think it would be more helpful for you to start.
Yeah, I can start. So I started thinking about foster care, adoption specifically, when I was single. All of my friends got married before I did. I was in my 30s before I was married. So as a woman, you start thinking about alternative ways to build your family. And that just kind of, I also had come into contact with foster care and adoption as a child. I'd met children that were adopted through our church, just kind of planted a seed and always was very curious about it. But when I was single, that's when I really got serious about it. And then when Brian and I got married and we decided to start our family, because I'd already seen the need in LA, there's over 30,000 foster kids just in LA County alone. We're one of the largest counties. It's hard to just turn your back on that just because, oh, look, now we can build our own biological family. So we talked about it, and one of my favorite books at the time was Adopted for Life by Russell Moore. That really spoke to me. He does an amazing job of weaving his kids' adoption story with the gospel and showing what a parallel that is. But what really sealed it is I was pregnant with Weston, my second child, and I was pretty far along. I think it was like 8 months. And I had this very vivid dream that I was talking to a teenager, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm adopted." I was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know you were adopted." And he's like, "Yeah, and your kids are out there." And I was like, "Oh." And then I woke up from the dream, and I walked out to our living room, and the book Adopted for Life was on our coffee table, and I had not read it in a long time, but I had forgotten that I'd lent it to somebody, and that somebody gave it to Brian, and he had it in his bag and had put it on the coffee table before he left for work. So I called him and I was like, I know this is not the time to bring this up, but I'm pretty sure God does not want us to let this go. And I was about to have a baby. So that basically sealed it. Like, we were in. And by then I already educated myself. We'd educated ourselves on foster care versus just other ways of adoption. We knew that was the route we wanted to go. We had no idea what was in store, but we got certified when Wes was 1. We started the process when he was 1. So then we were completely certified when he was 2.
I have a couple questions before we move to Kristen. You said that you had started that conversation with Brian when you were married. Did that start at all before marriage, that this was a desire of yours?
Yeah, I think when we were talking about family planning, I for sure, brought it up, and we talked about it, and he was very open to it. I think we didn't seriously make plans because we didn't even know if we could have children at that point. But because I was pregnant with our second child, I was like, that conversation we kind of glossed over. Yeah, we should probably circle back to that.
And then your knowledge of foster care versus adoption and that sort of thing, had that come through community or just through life you'd gained that knowledge?
Yeah, so I had actively gone to several conferences by then. I think there was a couple at Grace Community Church, and there were just booths of all different kinds of adoption, and there was like embryo adoption, there was private adoption table, there was foster care, and I just went to like almost every breakout just to educate myself. And Brian was with me. By the end, we were like, whoa, this is big, and I think the church needs to answer this call. Sure. And foster care was a very obvious way to step into that.
Very cool. Kristen?
Yeah, so I think for me, I didn't grow up with anybody in my life who was fostered or adopted. It wasn't part of my just community, or I didn't know any kids that were foster or adopted. And so it didn't really come into my space or to be aware of this need until being at Cornerstone, and I'm pretty sure it was a God's activity that Cornerstone had done, probably in call to the calling that God placed in your life and opening your eyes of the need in LA, and seeing the families that were a part of that. I don't want to call it like an initial movement, but there were like several families that were fostering all together at the same time at Cornerstone, including you, the Ortizes. I can't think of anybody else off the top of my head, but there were other people.
The Schaefers, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember sitting there thinking during God's activity, Jeremy and I, this was like in 2019, and Jeremy and I really hadn't begun talking about like family planning for us, specifically at that time. But I remember sitting there being like, wow, that is a huge need in LA. And we have an extra bedroom that I'm essentially using as an office. I was like, is God asking me to use that space to help the community? And I remember that was literally my thought of, okay, like, God, are you convicting me of trying to use this space for this need? And so I'm pretty sure I left church that day and being like, so Jeremy, what did you think about fostering? And his answer was, I don't think I really want to do that. I don't think I'm capable of doing that. And I was like, I think we should talk about it more. So that was ultimately how we entered the world of fostering. And slowly Jeremy, or I shouldn't say Jeremy was convicted, but like the Lord like slowly softened Jeremy's heart to this idea of sacrificially laying down his worries and fears, and giving those to him in answer to the calling of foster care.
Yeah. And just for some context, I was not about it at first, solely because I was like, I think it could be an emotional roller coaster, and I don't think I can handle it. But like the Lord not convicted me, but like grew me in that in my thinking and reminded me that He's my strength. And
yeah, so we had that conversation basically 3 years into being married, and then we started the process of the forms and connecting with our agency in 2019. And the pandemic happened in 2020 while we were still working our way through paperwork, or not necessarily paperwork, but just the process, like the home study, needing to be CPR certified. All of that was happening right up until the pandemic happened. And so when things shut down for that time period, they basically were like, oh, we don't have to do all these things in person. And so their capacity expanded being remote. And so we were certified what was supposed to be like another 6 months of a process in like 2 months. They were like, bam, 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 just getting it all done. So we became certified like in maybe early June of 2020.
And how quickly did you receive a placement?
June 20.
Like end of June.
Did that feel very fast? Did that feel a little bit like emotional whiplash?
I think we just didn't know what to expect. I think we were isolated. We were still sheltering in place. So I think it was just kind of, I feel like in some ways we weren't fully prepared for what to expect. So we were just kind of like flying by the seat of our pants. But at the same time, the system was changing along with it. Like the system was trying to navigate like new things to set in place to try and work within no contact. And I think that in and of itself just made our entire foster care journey very different.
Sure.
So Allison asked a question and made me think, curious what your guys' answers are to this, but all biological families typically have,
At least
a
months.
runway to land the plane.
Yeah.
And what did you guys feel when a baby showed up on your doorstep? And we were we were at your house when your first one showed up.
Yeah.
Because we had
it was after community group, right?
Yeah.
It was at night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was that sudden, kind of like a call and a knock on the door.
Yeah.
So we got certified at the end of December, and I remember fun fact, I share a birthday with 2 of my adopted daughters. So I had just had my birthday in January, and then I got a call 2 days later, and they're like, we have a baby. So we were certified in end of December, got a call like 2 weeks later.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, great. How old is she? 2 days. And wait a minute. When's her birthday? And then they're like, January 11th. I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I don't want to jump ahead of myself, but this is kind of providential. Like, I mean, feel pretty good about this. But even though I'd had 2 children and I knew how to take care of a child, and in the time that we were getting certified, we were gathering items we might need. You also don't know what age you're getting. Yeah. So I still, having a baby plopped in our living room, I remember lifting the blanket and just staring at Olivia's nose and being like, I don't recognize the nose. That's not a feature I'm familiar with. You know, when you see a baby, you're like, oh, she's got his eyes or her mama's mouth or whatever. And it was just the unknown. And I was like, she smelled different. It was all of that. And then you're like, okay, now I've got to set up the packet or whatever you have. Like, set up the pack and play. Where is she going to sleep? Yada, yada. You got to tell these little kids that are running around, here's your new baby sister, kind of, but not really, maybe. We don't know. Yeah. So you just go, I went into like this crisis mode, which for me, I function very well in crisis. I'm a getter-doner. And then I crash out later. But that's how it was for me. But yeah, you technically know that the children are coming, but they're so unknown. It's like Jim Gaffigan has this line where people ask him, what's it like to have so many kids? He's like, well, just imagine that you're in the deep end and you're drowning, and then somebody hands you a baby. And I was like, that's exactly foster care. That is how it feels.
Well, and the speed of both of your stories, I think, is evidence of the need in LA. That, you know, there's just so much need here that the calls are likely to come pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think for us, we had gotten several texts prior to that of the need for a placement, and by the time maybe we had talked about it or responded back to it, they had already been placed elsewhere. Wow. So like the turnaround time sometimes for placements is very quick as well.
Yeah.
I feel like we would get a text and we talk about it like for like 30 minutes and we're like, all right, I'm gonna send the text yes, and then they're like, oh, we don't need you anymore. Yeah,
and the age range is very different because it's like between newborn and 3 months, I think, is the first like
age bracket.
And so you're like, okay, so you're going to Target and you're like, okay, I need onesie sizes in newborn, onesie sizes in 0 to 3 months. I need just plain white stuff, like something for like a swaddle. And so Jeremy and I, who don't have biological kids, we're like trying to figure out, okay, what could potentially we need between newborn to 0 to 3 months without having the experience of raising a child in that age range. And I told Jeremy this story recently, but of remembering back on our first placement when we first got her, and I'm like, okay, so we're gonna try and swaddle her and like put her to bed. And so like I get the little, you know, blanket swaddle that we have, and I'm like putting her on the bed, and I'm like, oh no. I was like, this isn't the right size to swaddle. And I'm like, I'm like, what do we do? It's like 2 a.m. I was like, there's no place that is open at 2 a.m. for a swaddle, so we're just gonna have to like hold her all night. And so that's what we did. I was like, I don't know what to do. I was like,
yeah.
Kristen, something that I remember observing, this is true for both Jeremy and Kristen, but foster care just being like a little bit different. You guys didn't also have maternity or paternity leave. So you got these placements and it was just kind of like jumping into life.
Yeah, I think for our first placement was a little bit different just because we were both COVID at home. Sorry if this podcast is triggering talking about so much of COVID times. But that was literally when we were doing a chunk of our foster care placement. So yeah, it was definitely different for our first placement versus our second placement of jumping back into the work and
just full life, all of what's happening.
One of the things I wanted to touch on today was, I think it's hard because I'm speaking as someone who, before we fostered, I don't think I had a good understanding of what the identity of a foster child is in your family. And then after we had a foster child, 2 foster children, even though they're gone, I still refer to them as my daughters. Mm-hmm. So if you guys wouldn't mind maybe helping, what are some things that you could share that might help people understand how your love for a foster child is both similar and, Chrissie, maybe you can speak to this a little bit different from a biological child.
I can start.
Yeah.
So I would say it's different in that, again, you're receiving this completely just complete stranger with 0 instructions. So we had a newborn, which is a little bit easier than if we would have received a toddler, because a newborn, you can kind of figure out their rhythms quickly, and they don't need a lot of needs except to sleep and eat. And Olivia just slept. Mm-hmm. She was coming off of some substances, and that was her detox. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, by God's grace, she slept it off. But it was also similar in that I remember day 3 in the middle of a night feeding. I had put her to bed, and I was just staring at her, and I was like, I think I could have given birth to you. And that sounds really weird, but that was the level of bonding and love that I felt. And I was like, I don't know if I could ever tell anybody this without sounding like a crazy person. But I was in. And I knew that there were no guarantees, and it made no difference to her. I was just meeting her needs. So I noticed that bond still was there, even though I didn't physically birth her. It was just this like meeting her need and being a mother to her, and then, realizing the preciousness of her life. That was the same as my biological children. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me it's hard not knowing what the bond is like between a biological child and yourself, but I feel like I can't imagine it being deeper than the bond that I felt with both of them. With our first placement in particular, she actually, when she was dropped off, she didn't have a name. And so like for the first month, we just called her baby girl.
I think it was longer than a month. I think it was a few months.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I
don't know, if I could interject, I think we both would say that there was the natural bonding that a parent does with an infant. Like you were saying, Chrissie, I think it just naturally develops a deep connection with the child, and you just it feels like they are your child, and you realize in your mind that you would do absolutely anything for them. So I think that is maybe even what you were hinting at.
Yeah, it's hard to, I feel like it's really hard to explain, because in foster care, that the goal of it is to reunify when it's safe and appropriate for the child. And so you're establishing a bond with them that in a love of them, so that way they can therefore take that attachment style and apply it to potentially their new person that they aren't spending that time with. And it's a sacrificial aspect of yourself that you're saying I'm fully diving in to know that I, as an adult, can handle the emotional impact of losing you, knowing that it's for your betterment. But for me, it wasn't hard. Like, it wasn't a conscious thing to have to be like, oh, I have to try and like love you. I have to try and like form an attachment to you. I think it's sad in some of the cases of how these children are being dropped off. Like some of them, like some of the babies detoxing, not knowing the exact living conditions that a child was experiencing, especially with our second placement, not knowing how she spent that first 3 months of her life. When she specifically was dropped off, they undergo an assessment by professionals to like evaluate what they might need to help their situation. And when she was dropped off, they were like, I don't think she can hear, because she was unresponsive to like loud noise. And so we then had to start going through the process of trying to figure out, does she have a hearing disability? But she was just so overstimulated that first 3 months that loud noises just didn't flinch.
Yeah, and it's some of them, I can't remember, both or one of ours, they get dropped off with like a trash bag of their belongings. Like, it's not pretty or
nothing permanent either.
Yeah, like it you just kind of, it hits you like, oh, like this child needs love and care.
Kristen, I think that you kind of started to move into this a little bit, but I mean, what you're describing is sacrificial love, and I think that actually ties into maybe you could share, both of you could share some of the challenges that you've experienced in the foster care system, knowing that the foster care system itself is a broken system, and it's a part of a larger broken system that this has to exist at all. And so if you guys wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about some of the things that stand out to you as challenges.
I think for us in particular, it was just challenging navigating a system that was already broken, trying to work within the parameters of no contact, or trying to, it felt like a time where they were just making up rules and making up like things to try and solve a problem of no contact, or working specifically. I mean, if you think about it, I guess what I'm referring to is visitation specifically. So with a foster care placement, usually part of the reunification process is to have visitations with the bio family, so that way they can bond still and be in contact. But some of these rehab facilities have, during that time, very limited visiting hours. And so you're trying to coordinate with DCFS, like, who can pick up the child, who can supervise the visit, who can, like, bring the child back, trying to do that around nap times, trying to do that around visitation times. It just was really challenging, the logistic aspect of that, on top of therapies, on top of DCFS visits. That was all just very challenging.
So for me, we were pre-COVID, and I had the opposite problem. I had so many people in and out of my life at all times. And, we would have visits from not only our DCFS social worker, but we were with an FFA, which is a private placement. So they would bring their own social worker in weekly. We had a court advocate come by, somebody with the lawyer at some point. We had in-home therapies 3 times a week. Our time was not our own. And it was challenging to reorient our entire rhythm around these children we brought in. They really did demand all of the needs. And my other kids, thankfully, well, maybe they just had to be, they were just very flexible and took a back seat with grace. I don't think they had a choice, but that's just the bottom line. You have to get them to so many appointments within 2 weeks. I had other little kids at home, so I either had to have Brian come home and take over, or I had to bring everybody with me. And these appointments are Medi-Cal appointments, so there's nothing fancy about them. There's lots of waiting. You know, if the baby's hungry, they don't put you in the front of the line. You just have to feed the baby and pace the hallways. I kind of developed a big brother complex. Like every move I made, every decision I made, I thought someone's going to notice and I better do this correctly. You have to account for every piece of clothing you buy them, every formula.
I forgot about that.
Caroline had to be on a special formula that was hard to find. I was driving downtown to find this formula. Wow. You know, I'd get there and they'd be like, you're not authorized, so I have to get on the phone. It's just like, I
document every medicine.
Yeah, so that alone, you're not only taking on this child, which is a 24/7 job, but you are like constantly accountable to the state.
Right.
And it was very challenging. That, I know that goes into our next question about feeling isolated, but that's where I really struggled. We are their stand-in parent and their advocate, but we have no voice. You know, if we're lucky, we get a social worker who actually cares what we think. And maybe they'll bring that to the judge, but the judge really, it's not their job to consider what the foster parent cares about and thinks. We really are just a glorified babysitter, and some days that gets to you because of the amount of work that you're putting in.
Yeah.
So that was a constant battle to kind of like remind yourself that you're stepping into this as a sacrificial figure, and you have to keep your eyes on Christ and be like, he didn't get anything out of it either. He really didn't. He didn't have a voice either. Like this is a way you show them mercy and grace.
It's very well put.
Yeah.
I think it's that brings up an interesting point, that we are entering into this as believers in the gospel of Christ's example on the cross, of God the Father's example of giving up his son. And so we are aiming to love this child and love the people that are all in our lives now with gospel love. But what makes that difficult, or the conflict that arises, is that the majority of the people that are around you are not looking at the situation the same way. And so when you're trying to love this child with gospel love, so you can, even in infant stages, plant gospel seeds in their lives, you're met with a lot of resistance, and you realize, oh, like this, at the end of the day, this is not your biological child, but yet you are still with the child 24/7. And so
yeah, I think also another challenge that we faced was we were also not just discipling our placements, but with our second placement in particular, her mom as well, in dealing with her recovery and her mental health issues, and trying to be a light to her. But I think that was just very taxing on doing that. It was taxing doing it so frequently. It felt like every day we were having conversations at some point, and trying to, it felt like this constant stream of pouring out, to the point where you were almost on empty, ending every day like on completely empty, and trying to find some way to to fill it back up so you could pour it out again the next day.
Yeah, I think, and for context for that, it was daily. We were having text messages or emails or phone calls, but we were also court ordered to have FaceTimes with BioMom 5 days a week for an hour. And you can imagine how difficult that is with an infant
Right.
who doesn't respond. And, you know, her mom was struggling with things too. And so that just made it even more complicated. So, Chrissie, you mentioned something about how this time can sometimes feel isolating. What do you guys, what was your experience in foster care that made it feel so isolating? And how was finding community, how did finding community help in discipling through foster care?
So I already touched on what made it feel isolating for me. So Kristen, you had a different experience. You were in COVID and you were isolated.
Yeah. I think that was a part. I think feeling isolated during the peak of the pandemic was just challenging in and of itself. However, I will say that there was also a lot of blessings. We had so many people from church dropping off meals for us, whether that be Uber Eats. I don't know how many times we ate Tender Grains. But like dropping off food was just so great, or people just texting and asking how we are doing. But I think there is some level of just like, I still feel this now, where you're just like, I wish there was somebody that could like relate to my experience. Where you're just like, oh, like it'd be so nice to have somebody with me that like fully understands or is like, yes, what happened was like awful, or that I can't believe that they ordered that. That's so unlike what the system's supposed to work, even though the system is already isolating in and of itself. So I think there was just some level of that, of wishing there were more people who were in a similar life circumstance, but I think everybody wishes that for whatever they're going through.
Yeah, you wish that there was other people that experienced what you experienced. At the same time, knowing the difficulty that you and I experienced, we wouldn't wish that on like our worst enemy. But I mean, that's why Kristen and I joined a support group after our second placement left, just because it was a support group for people who lost children in the foster care system. And so it was comforting for a while to hear other people's stories, similar stories, and have camaraderie in that.
So I knew going into this, since Brian and I kind of cut the trail for at least this church, I was really proactive in building my community. I already had local church community by default, being the pastor's wife, but I sought out friendships because I knew a couple of people in other churches that I was childhood friends with who were already fostering and adopting, and I just asked them, can I come over? And I picked their brain and then put them on. I was like, can I text you? And they're like, yeah, absolutely, anytime. So I was pretty proactive in developing those, what I call foxhole friendships, because you're like, you can't really see what the other person's doing. You're too crazy and you're too busy to actually help with your own crisis. But every once in a while you can peek your head out and look over and know that your neighbor is like going through what you're going through, and throw them a supply or two and then bring it back in your foxhole. And that is how I kind of made it through. And then as we brought foster care into Cornerstone, Brian and I made sure we were extremely available and transparent with our struggles, so that people that we were cutting trails for would understand, like, you're normal. It's okay to feel this way. It's very complicated. It's both and it's kind of how I've developed my darker humor with the crisis, looking at hard things and just finding the hilarity of all of it. Yeah,
that was something I really appreciated about when we were going through foster care, is I knew that I could always text Chrissie to help be like, well, that really does suck. Like that's really hard. Like that's terrible. And she wasn't always trying to give the bright side, like on the bright side, this.
Yeah.
And it's like,
No, they're just crazy. That's bad.
Like, yeah, that's the worst. And like, that's what I felt like I needed was somebody to just be like, yes, you're valid in your feeling of like, this is ridiculous, or this is hard, or yes, that is normal. Yes, that is like something to maybe get checked out by a doctor or a specialist, or to advocate further for, or to, you know, try and get them to see this specialist or that specialist. And I think I really appreciated that about you being able to rely on you during that season.
So I recall when we would have court dates that were looming, I would turn to the Psalms. I would read through a Psalm every day, do a devotional about it, pray, because so many of the Psalms just cry out to God in dire circumstances, and it is the psalmist being so vulnerable, completely open to God and his struggles. Another thing that I would think about is God, his sacrifice of his own son, laying down his life, giving up his son for my benefit. Or I would think of the story of Abraham and Isaac, or Samuel's mom, I forget her name. Deborah? No, it's not Deborah. Hannah praying and asking or dedicating this son to the Lord's service. Just this idea of sacrifice. So I'm curious, what are some scriptures or some biblical concepts that you guys gleaned from in discipling through foster care?
I think, honestly, it almost felt like the entire lens for me. I'm just kidding. For me, what it felt like was my entire lens for viewing this circumstance was through the worldview of what I believe about God and his character and his truth, and like what he says and what his calling in our lives are, and being a testimony to that. And I wouldn't say this happened maybe during the thick of the reunification process for both of the kids, but towards the end, I really clung to the stories of Abraham and Isaac, and the story of Moses and his mother, and how when circumstances were dire for Moses's mom, like she placed him in a basket and sent him down the river and was like, God, take care of him. Like literally, I have no control over the circumstances that are happening around me. I'm laying them down and giving them up to you, to do with their life what you will. And same with Abraham and Isaac, and God asking Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, and Abraham being like, oh, okay, like I guess we're gonna prepare to go up the mountain to sacrifice. And I think those stories in particular, you know, when you think about it, they're interesting stories to include in the Bible. Like God doesn't ask us in this modern age really to relate to the story of going to sacrifice a child, but for me, I was grateful that story was there, as it left me something to cling to of there's a reason for all of this. There's why this is happening, and what he's asking me to do.
Yeah, I had I think I clung to similar concepts for sure, especially when we didn't know if the first child was going to come. In fact, she was supposed to reunify at some point, and then the relative had a change of heart miraculously, strangely. But I remember studying that passage where, Abraham had prayed for the son, and then he was given Isaac, and then God said, go up to the mountain and lay him down. And he had no idea that he was going to spare him, but he had enough faith to do it. And I felt that you want the miracle of seeing the ram be the replacement, but there's no guarantee. And my heart goes out to people who don't get that replacement, and that child is taken, because to them that child is dead. They're still living, but that time with you, they're gone. But I dwelled a lot as well in the Psalms. I remember 23, I just stayed there, even though I walked through the valley of the shadow of death. You're in this season of kind of terror. You are so out of control, and it's not for yourself, it's for this child that you would give up your life for, and yet you have no actual legal standing to do so.
I think we've touched a lot on, and rightfully so, that foster care is hard, and it is messy, and it's imperfect, and it's just difficult. But I'm curious how you guys found joy, peace, strength in the midst of walking through this journey, whether it be from community, whether it be from scripture. And I know we've touched on some of those, but how important was it, I guess, is the better question. How important was it for your survival in the midst of foster care to find the joy, peace, and strength of the Lord?
So for me, I kind of came at this question a little bit differently, because my foster care journey was much shorter than my adoptive journey, and finding joy and peace and strength is still extremely difficult. Even though we signed the papers and the three are legally and everywhere our children, we are still living with the trauma of separation and what that has done to their little brains and their behaviors. And as they grow, and every year something else comes up, and we have to tweak this and we have to tweak that. And our family continues to orient around their very, very high needs. And I remember kind of feeling in the midst of 2020, I don't have joy in motherhood. I've lost my joy. And I think that's because I confused it with happiness. And so for me, especially now, and I think before, I've realized that joy can exist throughout the brokenness, and understanding what joy is and where it comes from and what it means, and having joy in the idea that we are doing good, hard work, and it's messy, and it's not easy, and it's a broken path that Brian and I entered into on purpose, and therefore we brought our biological children along. That's where the peace and the strength kind of come to bolster us. Honestly, foster care was such a blip and so far away. We've been decertified for almost 6 years now. But we are reaping and sowing together and weeping. And we're sowing tears, and the Lord promises that joy comes in the morning. And that's kind of what we're living out right now.
Yeah, I think for us, we would unequivocally say that if it wasn't for the Lord's strength, the separation that we experienced, we would have, it would have ruined us. Not like literally like destroyed us, but it was so hard even with the Lord. But the Lord was faithful to like walk alongside of us and care for us and be gentle with us. Even in I'll share from my own experience. I was angry with the Lord for a while, where I would question why. I wanted to understand why this happened. God, if you're good, why would you let this happen? God, if you're sovereign, why didn't you stop this from happening? And so I think through that, I was able to understand that God is big enough to hear my little Jeremy's complaints, but also caring and gentle and merciful enough to still not push me away, but to draw me even closer. So I think knowing his strength and his peace through separation has been super helpful for me. And I think, I don't know, Kristen, would you say anything different?
Yeah, sorry, I'm crying. I think the reason for my tears is because when I think back in our season of foster care, my joy and my peace were like the girls themselves and the relationship with them. Like, even though the system itself was not fair most of the time, my joy was them and like who they were as people, as little people, and their personalities, and the joy that they had in life despite their circumstances. And our second placement was only 2, so she was a toddler, just not comprehending what her life really was at that time. But she was just full of joy. And I think that was such, like, the kids were the best part of the whole system. And I wouldn't change it, and I wouldn't change knowing them. I don't regret doing it. And it's just, my tears are because I miss them.
Sure.
Thanks for being vulnerable with that. I think it speaks to a lot of what we were introing this episode with, about the fact that there are principles of the foster care journey that are so applicable to discipling even biological kids. There's sacrifice, there is unconditional love, there is joy in the lives of the people that we've been entrusted to care for, whether biological or foster care. There is hardships, there is questions about what is best for them, there is community. There are so many aspects of discipleship that go across the board. And I think what we've been highlighting today is how raw foster care discipleship is. It is all the things that we talk about in theory a lot of times with biological kids, but with everything stripped away, and it's like where the rubber meets the road of, and not to say that I'm not trying to say that biological parents don't have their own challenges and don't have their own joys and victories, but I think foster care enables parents to love kids in a way that, like I said, is just raw and unfiltered, and where there's hurdles that have to be jumped over and loops to go through, hoops to jump through, and all sorts of trials and tribulations. But there's so much love that comes from the relationship and the bonding that you build with these kids. I don't know if any of you guys have similar thoughts, but that's kind of what I was hoping to pull out of this episode, because foster care isn't for everybody. I would say, like, we're not here to say, like, if you're listening to this, you need to, like, pick up the mantle and go foster care. We hope some of you will, but I guess, well, I'll end with this question. Why would you encourage others to explore foster care, even if they just have a minor interest in it right now?
I think right now in our society, we really try to avoid doing hard things. Mm-hmm. Like, we order Instacart because it's easier than going to the grocery store and navigating aisles and people and finding parking and all these things. You know, we use AI because it gets us the result quicker. We want to shortcut different things. But I think when I'm hopefully 80 and like sitting in the nursing home looking back on life, I'd like to think that what comes to mind is the positives from our foster care experience, the relationships that were built, the love that was shared, and you don't remember as much the struggle it was. Like, you remember it, but it wasn't, I don't know, it's probably what most mothers feel like when they give birth. They're like, oh my gosh, I want another baby, but you don't remember how hard delivery was. And I would just encourage, while we don't like to do hard things, being sensitive to what maybe God is calling you to do with the resources that he has given you in life. For us, it was that second bedroom, and looking at it as a means of ministry and feeling sensitive to the Holy Spirit. And we weren't blind to the fact that things were going to be hard. We weren't, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed about what could happen, but it was definitely one of the best things that I've done in life. The hardest, but I don't think some of the best things in life come without the hard.
Just briefly going back to what Jeremy was saying before, the word that came to me was unrequited love. And if you've ever thought about like your first crush, and you're an angsty teen and that person just doesn't see you. And in a lot of ways, foster care is an unrequited love. And even raising my children now, there is unrequited love there. Different aspects of it, different seasons. They are coming from a place of trauma, so they don't necessarily see the big picture. They just see that you're against them or you're in their way to get what they want. And there is this constant pouring out and this brokenness. And who would ever volunteer for that but Christ? So why would we encourage others? Well, the need is great. There's 30,000 children in foster care. And that number, I've looked it up, it has not budged in the last decade. Wow. It goes up and down a tiny bit by maybe 100,000. But it's always great. And thankfully, the bulk of them do reunify. But they need a safe place to go so they don't end up being trafficked and abused in the meantime. And the church we can solve that problem. And you don't have to serve as a foster parent to disciple foster youth. Like right now, we're building a team to go to Royal Family Kids Camp, and we're inviting children in foster care or recently in foster care to come with us, and we serve them for a week, and we don't sleep and we don't shower, and we pour out and pour out and pour out, and these kids have an amazing blast, and they think about, like, they memorize verses, they learn about, the birthday party, they get a whole week of yes, and we can also provide their caregivers respite because their caregivers are doing good hard work. No matter what we think of them, they're doing good hard work. They're in the trenches. There's other ways. There's CASA, court appointed advocates, where you can mentor. You can donate if the Lord's blessed you with financial means. You can donate, you can volunteer, but you should definitely educate yourself and just figure out what there is out there. If you can't physically bring children into your home, again, it's not for everybody. There are ways for you to serve, and the need is great. And once you see it, you cannot turn away.
Yeah. And I'm going to just throw out there that if anybody's listening to this and has questions, you you can email me or come find me on a Sunday. Well, don't come find me on a Sunday. I'm usually busy, but you can email me, jeremy@cornerstonewla.org. And I'd be happy to just sit down and like talk with you, answer any questions you might have, even point you in directions of others here at the church or organizations that you can get involved with. And so please feel free to email me or come talk to me. And I think in closing, I was reading an article on Gospel Coalition called Wanted, Parents Willing to Get Too Attached, and it's by Brittany Lind. And I thought this quote was really, it really just exemplifies what we've been talking about today. And I'll close with this. It says, opening your heart to love any child is risky and requires a loss of self. Opening your heart and home to a foster child may seem especially risky, but in losing ourselves, we gain. Sorry, I'm getting a little choked up. But in losing ourselves, we gain. We grow in understanding how Jesus loved us and gave himself up for us. In seeking to love sacrificially, we pray others will see a picture of the gospel and be drawn to Christ. Thank you guys for listening, and we hope to see you at church on Sunday, and we love you all. Have a great week.